The atmosphere in the sub-level 2 of the Punta Arenas port annex wasn't just cold, it was sterile, possessing that specific kind of industrial chill that penetrates the bones and ignores layers of clothing. The only audible sound was the low, irregular hum of an industrial dehumidifier in the corner, struggling uselessly against the sea air that impregnated the concrete. It was the early morning of September 14, 2016. The digital clock on the wall read 03:42 a.m., and Jonas Visser tasted the metallic tang of adrenaline in his mouth. He was motionless, sitting on a broken ergonomic chair, hands splayed flat across a stainless steel table. Beneath his fingers lay a document that shouldn't exist, a maritime reinsurance policy from the 1960s, its brittle texture betraying years of neglect in damp archives. Jonas looked back toward the reinforced security door that separated the archive from the rest of the port. He had locked it, turning the 2 manual deadbolts, but the solidity of the steel no longer offered comfort. His breath formed small clouds of vapor in the freezing air. The document before him detailed the sinking of the freighter MV Sanctus. The problem wasn't the shipwreck itself, but the mathematical precision of the incident's coordinates. Jonas, a man who had dedicated 30 years to studying maps and routes, knew those coordinates pointed to the interior of the continental ice shelf, miles from any navigable water. He was staring at physical proof that the official history of Antarctic logistics was a facade. In that moment, in the oppressive silence of the Chilean dawn, Jonas Visser understood that the real danger isn't what is hidden in the dark, but what is hidden in plain sight, protected only by bureaucracy and human disinterest. To understand the weight of the discovery, one must understand the man. Jonas Visser, 55, did not fit the profile of a hero or a conspiracy theorist. He was a forensic actuary, a Dutch specialist hired to clean up the messes left by bankrupt insurance companies. His life was a straight line of cheap hotels, instant coffee, and Excel spreadsheets. He operated in the vacuum left by corporations. When a company died, he was the vulture coming to sort what remained of the bones. The European holding company that sent him to Chile had a purely financial objective: to audit the physical assets of the defunct transoceanic Lloyds to clear the property for sale. The work was mechanical: read, catalogue, decide whether to digitize or incinerate. For 2 weeks, Jonas became part of the warehouse furniture. He memorized the sound of the pipes, the schedule of external security patrols, and the smell of rotting paper that dominated the place. The rupture occurred on Tuesday afternoon upon opening Box 404, a reinforced plastic container that had been erroneously marked with a sanitary disposal tag. Inside, protected by airtight plastic bags, were the red folders of high-priority claims. The first document he pulled was for the MV Sanctus, dated 1962. The indemnity value paid at the time, adjusted for inflation, would be enough to build a small airport. The cause of loss: collision with ice barrier. But as Jonas read the detailed cargo manifest, his eyes narrowed. The ship wasn't carrying coal, oil, or fish. The manifest listed import codes for positive pressure ventilation systems and, even stranger, mahogany and velvet archive furniture. Why would a freighter be carrying the interior of a palace and a hospital-grade air filtration system into the Antarctic Ocean at the height of the Cold War? Jonas's first reaction was clinical. He cleaned his glasses and assumed there was a typing error in the coordinates. It was common in the 60s to confuse minutes with degrees. He stood up, joints cracking from the cold, and unrolled a large-scale hydrographic chart onto the side table. With a navigation ruler and a compass, he plotted the exact point: 17:18 south, 11:15 east. He redid the calculation 3 times. The point fell unequivocally over Queen Maud Land, in a region known as New Swabia. It wasn't on the coast. It was 50 kilometers inland into the perpetual ice. A ship couldn't collide there. A ship couldn't be there. Jonas's rational denial crumbled when he reached for the next folder, referring to the SS Veritas, lost in 1974. The insurer was the same. The beneficiary bank was an obscure subsidiary linked to the Institute for the Works of Religion, the E. Vatican Bank, and the shipwreck coordinates were identical, down to the decimal second. Jonas felt a shiver that didn't come from the room's temperature. The statistical probability of two different ships, separated by 12 years, sinking at the exact same geographic point is null. He continued, frantic. He found records from 1958, 1981, and 1989, all total loss. All paid in full without wreckage investigation. All disappeared into the same blind spot on the map. The silence of the archive became deafening. Jonas realized he wasn't looking at accidents. He was looking at a delivery schedule. The rationalization protocol failed. Reality imposed a terrifying logic. The next morning brought a grey light and a sensation of surveillance. Jonas, with deep dark circles under his eyes, decided not to digitize the files immediately. The instinct for self-preservation screamed louder. He tried to access the Lloyd's central server in London through an old terminal using a VPN connection he knew was monitored, but it was his only option. He typed the policy numbers into the global search system. The cursor blinked, the computer's hard drive whirred noisily, and the screen turned blue. It wasn't a standard system error. A black dialog box appeared with red text, Restricted Access Concordate Protocol Level 5. Immediately, the building's internet connection dropped. Jonas tried to use the landline in his room to call a colleague in the Netherlands. The line was dead. Seconds. Later, the phone rang. The sound of the bell echoed violently off the concrete walls. Jonas answered, his trembling hand clutching the plastic receiver. On the other end, there was only the sound of breathing and a background noise that sounded like old teletypes or dot matrix printers working frantically. No one spoke. The line went dead. Minutes later, the port manager, a man who generally ignored Jonas's existence, appeared at the door. He was sweating, despite the cold. He asked if Jonas had found any sensitive material outside the scope, and suggested with a nervous smile that he take the rest of the day off to rest as he looked stressed. The unspoken message was clear. Stop digging. Jonas's isolation became absolute. He was surrounded, and the system was already reacting to his intrusion like an antibody attacking a virus. That night, driven by a technical obsession that outweighed fear, Jonas returned to the archive, entering through the back using the service key he still possessed. He knew time was running out. He ignored the computer and went straight to the physical paper, the only thing that couldn't be remotely edited. In the false bottom of the box, he found an envelope sealed with papal wax, already broken. Inside were the structural modification blueprints for the 1989 ship and a complete passenger list. The blueprints were definitive proof. The SS Veritas was no ordinary freighter. The diagrams showed that the cargo holds had been converted into habitation bunkers, lead-lined and equipped with independent life support systems. There were internal elevators connecting the upper deck to a hatch at the bottom of the hull, designed to dock with something submerged. But the real horror was in the passenger list. Not sailors. Cardinals, bishops, renowned civil architects, and German nuclear engineers. Next to each name, in the return field, the entry was blank, or marked with the code Permanent Transfer, Base 211. Here is where the story gets strange. Pay attention to this detail. One of the items listed in the 1989 cargo was Secret Archive, Codices 1 to 500. This indicated the physical transfer of parts of the Vatican Library to the ice. They weren't just building a base, they were moving the institution's core out of Europe. Paranoia ceased to be a theory when Jonas returned to his hotel, the Plaza del Estrecho. Upon entering room 302, he stopped at the door. The air smelled of strong cleaning chemicals, masking something. Subtler, like burnt ozone. The room was immaculate. The maid had already been there in the morning, yet the bed was made again, with military precision, the sheets pulled too tight. He went to the spot where he had hidden his personal laptop, inside the lining of the box spring. The laptop was there, but it was warm to the touch. When he opened it, the screen immediately lit up with a command terminal window, executing a low-level formatting script. Jonas watched, helpless, as years of personal files, photos, and work documents were overwritten by zeros and ones. He tried to turn off the device, but it didn't respond. The room phone rang. He answered, feeling his heart beating in his throat. A synthetic voice, clearly computer-generated, said, "The inventory has been concluded, Mr. Visser. Please await transport." Jonas hung up and ran to the window. On the deserted street, a black sedan with tinted windows was parked with the engine running directly in front of the hotel entrance. Wasn't just being watched, he was being herded. The fear became physical, a sharp pain in his stomach. They didn't need to kill him. They just needed to ensure he had no proof. Jonas grabbed the physical documents he had on him, the only leverage he had left, and fled via the fire escape, avoiding the lobby. He headed to a busy public hospital, believing the presence of security cameras and witnesses would buy him some time. Sitting in the emergency waiting room, surrounded by sick and tired people, he read the last document in the dossier, an internal memo dated February 2012. The text was short, dry, and terrifying. Structural integrity confirmation, Sector Atlas operational, Pontifical quarters ready, initiate silent exodus protocol. The date coincided with day precision to the shocking announcement of Pope Benedict XV's resignation, the first pope to resign in centuries. The pieces clicked together with a horrifying mental snap. Base 211 in Queen Maud Land wasn't a reheated internet legend. It was a real contingency plan, funded and built over 60 years, using fake shipwrecks to hide the transport of materials and people. The Vatican knew something. The elite knew something. They were preparing an ark in the most isolated place on Earth, far from pandemics, nuclear wars, or social collapse. Jonas saw the truth. Real power was no longer in the palaces of Europe. Real power had packed its bags and moved to the ice. The conclusion of Jonas Visser's story was anticlimactic and bureaucratic, which makes it all the more realistic. He wasn't murdered in an alleyway. 2 days later, he was approached by holding company lawyers in a cafe. They presented a dossier with photos of his family in the Netherlands and offered a deal. Early retirement with full pension in exchange for signing an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, that stipulated immediate imprisonment for any breach of confidentiality. Jonas, exhausted, defeated, and terrified by the scope of what he had seen, signed. The following week, a massive electrical fire completely destroyed the archive annex at the Punta Arenas port. The fire department report cited overload in old wiring. The fire was so intense it melted the steel cabinets. No evidence remained. Jonas lives today on a small farm in rural Portugal, growing vineyards. He owns no computer, uses no smartphones, and refuses to travel anywhere near the sea. The ships remain listed as shipwrecks in official records. The system healed the glitch. But the question Jonas whispers to the few who will listen is, if the Ark is ready and the VIPs have already been transferred, how long until the rain starts? Where are you following this dossier from? Comment your city and country below. If the signal were given today, would you know where to look? Subscribe to the channel for the next report on the glitches in our reality.